ask my first.
Sorry.
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure the first time we did like a 45-minute meeting and never recorded it. So we had to do it again. We were just like, oops. So, so did you enjoy the reading that you did?
I did. I liked the second chapter. The first chapter was okay. I mean, like, the second chapter was just easier to read.
Yeah, I felt like the first chapter was really repetitive on itself.
Yeah.
As long as it wasn't just my ADHD going, you're reading the same thing over and okay.
Cool. I had to read like every page like at least twice. I was like, I think they said the same thing like 9 times.
Well, it wasn't just me then. The whole, you looked over the rubric and like the choices for conceptual ideas and stuff to kind of do your stuff.
I haven't looked at the rubric yet, really.
Oh, okay. Because there were just some like themes throughout, which like I found when I looked at that and then like read it, it kind of helped me pick and choose what I needed to actually be looking for instead of getting lost in like the repetitivity of the text. So a couple of those were like dehumanization versus humanization, or like I know the second chapter, it was a little bit on like the banking education kind of thing versus like, so like conscious learning versus like potential learning. Just because they're regurgitating information doesn't mean they've actually like felt passionate towards it or like actually applied it to their lives. So you like the second chapter better?
Yeah, I feel like that's true. Like how like all through my high school, like the information was just like told to you and the main goal was just to memorize it and not really like understand it. Whereas
Right.
like I think if we had like actual discussions about it, or like multiple people said how they feel about like a situation, like I just feel like people would understand it better and like remember everything better.
Right. I had made a note here. It was like repetition, regurgitation kind of thing, like just like beat it into them, have them spit back out to you for like a test score, versus like if someone actually just sits down and thinks about an idea or thinks about something going on around them, they're more likely to have an emotional attachment to that thought, or like, a personal something to go along with it. And therefore critical thinking, or people just basically asking why something's this way. Yeah. So you take the thought process out of it when you're just human copy machine.
I think that's why she has us do so many discussions. So like actually understand it.
Yeah. It's like they want us to critically think or something.
Who would have thought?
What else do I have here? Some of the stuff from like the first chapter I got was just like understanding the feeling of despair, yet they can't like fall into that hopelessness, because feeding into the hopelessness starts the cycle of them just being dependent on their oppressors kind of thing. And how it's a type of self-harm. They become the sub-oppressor through their own reliance.
Yeah.
I had kind of tied it back into the first book. Like I was really kind of like ticked off at how like, I don't know what book you read for the first one, but I had done the hookup culture.
Oh, I read the Henrietta Lacks one.
Okay, so like the big theme of the hookup culture was how it was just like really dehumanizing of basically everybody involved, and like the more animalistic the behavior, the worse the behavior got kind of thing. And tying it back into that, like the powerful people aren't going to just willingly give up their power to be people. It's not like they're, and like anything that they do give into is just like false generosity to keep like the bay.
Yeah.
So so it was very interesting to see like the ties to that. What was your book about? Like, what did you guys kind of get to the basic theme of it?
Well, basically, in the 50s, like the field of medicine was like completely different. Like they took this lady's cancer cells without her permission, and then she ended up dying, and they made like millions of dollars off of her cells, and like her family knew nothing about it for like 30 years. And then
Huh.
like that's what like cured polio, and like chemo drugs were made from that. So it was just like showing how much it's changed, and like how different, I guess, everything was back then.
Well, you could have kind of a tie to dehumanization there with like them just not caring about that person
Yeah.
in regards to anything they did, and then just like making money hand over fist and giving it to not the right places and doing whatever they want with it.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
like, yeah, that does kind of tie into, oppressor, oppressed.
Mhm.
Those people weren't even aware of their oppression. So they were just like living life like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, yeah. So it's crazy how like things like that can happen and just people are so unaware of like what's going on sometimes.
Mhm. I think it's crazy how often we take like our freedom for granted, like in the United States. Like
Very so.
I don't even think about like how I can just do whatever I want all day, like I just
Right.
do
You
it.
don't have anyone to answer to.
Yeah. And like I couldn't imagine living in like a place where they tell me what to do all the time, you know?
Right. I kind of had a note here that went along with that. It was said, it was like a blocked view of privilege. You're
Mhm.
just kind of stuck with your blinders on because that's just your day to day. You don't realize like anything. You don't realize that it could be way worse. They're way different.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting how it said that like the people who were, sorry, the oppressors like didn't always know that they were like oppressing the people. I thought that was interesting. Like they were just so like
I
used
mean,
to.
that happens now though. Like think about if someone accuses someone of like having white privilege or, the cis white male concept, like people will get up into arms over like, well, I'm not like that or this and that. And it's like, well, you kind of were born the way you look. So like unfortunately it kind of exists. And like if you can't admit that, then you're kind of a problematic person.
Yeah.
So it like, I mean, it happens now,
Mm-hmm.
especially among like the mega wealthy, like, oh, I can't solve that problem, so it's not my problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I'm just looking at my, oh, I had like another thing. It was like selfishness has no place in humanity for all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not like a problem that just like one side can fix. Like, everybody has to either do something.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then back to the education thing, I had made a note that the problem with like regurgitory education is the winners of history write history.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're just regurgitating like what they want regurgitated back and leaving out like important parts of other things, then you're only getting like part of the story.
Right. I guess like I always knew like, but I guess I never thought about it before. But in the first chapter, it was saying that the oppressors are the one who initiate violence, like in times of like the oppressed like stand up for themselves. And like it at first it like shook me, like I was like, but then like thinking back on it, like the back when like slavery was becoming like abolished, like the white slave owners were like starting the riots and stuff because they couldn't have slaves anymore.
Right. Just burning it down if they had to change how it was going to be. Like they weren't going to lose out or they weren't going to be the powerless in the situation. Like they were still like just heaving for control in some aspect.
Mhm.
And even if they're not like conscious of that until that point, like that doesn't make them any less of the oppressors before that point.
Right.
I have a note here that says it like oppression destroys the livelihood or life because they're accepting the way that their life is through fear of their boss being dependent on the oppression. Like they're so afraid to have even less than they have that they'll just like tolerate it because it's better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lack of confidence to even get out, like that hopelessness I've spoke of, like with hopelessness, like there's no fight left. You're not going to dig and claw your way out. And again, the oppressors aren't going to release without that violent confrontation that they, started themselves.
Right.
That goes forward somewhere.
Yeah.
They're all addicted to the lifestyle is another note I had.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the oppressors use the excuse work harder and you'd have stuff too mentality.
Mm-hmm. I think it's crazy how the like oppressors had so much of a hold over the oppressed people's like own view of themselves. Like if they said they were ignorant, then they were like, oh yeah, I'm ignorant. Or like anything that they said, they were just like automatically believing them. Like
Yeah, they were just conditioned lifestyle for so long that they didn't know that there were other options.
yeah, it's like crazy how much power they had over them.
I have a note about like the oppressors fearing the loss of the lifestyle, that anything less than what they have now would be terrible, even at the expense of like the people they're oppressing. Like they don't know. They don't know what they're missing out on. So how could it be like that terrible for them to know that they're,
Right.
living less than?
I had one that was it said that I genuinely saw that the oppressors see themselves as being oppressed when the oppressed fight for their freedom. So
Mhm.
like because they're just like, oh, you have the audacity to like take what's mine when it's not even theirs. And then they have like that like they play the guilt or the victim card.
Right. Well, they don't want to become oppressed themselves, and they know that that's the like natural life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And like, why would they sacrifice their personal interests for strangers, basically?
Right.
They're just worried about getting back what they're like serving up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had like notes here about them shoving their authentic selves down for fear of like being ostracized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Like,
had one of why do they fear authenticity? Because maybe the responsibility that would come with it of like owning up to their actions and themselves.
yeah. I actually have the same note there. I have loss of self through a prescribed idea of success. To be a new man, one must do the model they saw before them. Wiggling free of the mindset would mean to have freedom, but be responsible for failure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I think that's like a really good like some of the concepts in the rubric were really touching on that, like the fear of failure thing. Actually pull it up if that's helpful. So I totally felt the same as you. I had no idea really even where to start with this book.
Yeah.
It was just like, this is either really repetitive and I'm not getting it,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm missing something. Sorry, I'm just pulling the rubric up on my computer. Here we go.
So this essay is like our last assignment for the class, right?
Right?
That's
Yep.
crazy.
It's like 22 days. tell it's due. So it says pick two of the following topics to explore in relation to oppression. A is banking concept and problem posing concept. B is people as fully human self-advocation. Dialogic or anti-dialogic action is C. Instruments of oppression and liberations is D. E is oppressors versus leaders in relation to a revolution. F is, oh gosh, conscience. You know the word that I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna slaughter because I have no Spanish in my, versus fear of freedom. And then G is humanization versus dehumanization. And then H is that real consciousness versus potential consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So there's those 8 options to like choose to have your arguments and definition or define 2 topics, then yeah, all that stuff. And then the rewrite activity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had started a little bit on that, but it was just more of the same, like the banking form kills critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Fitting education standards in a box, killing creativity and independent thought. And then to be equal and free would be complete humanization, but to do so, the oppressed must take charge without becoming the new oppressors. Fearful of failure, it is easier to stay hopeless and be oppressed. Like that victimization role, like you were saying.
Did you notice how like in the excerpts that the oppressed people were like speaking about themselves in third person?
They were what?
They were speaking about
Oh,
themselves.
why did it freeze? It froze up. Sorry. What? Can you repeat that one last time?
I would just thought it was interesting that like in the excerpts when they were interviewing the like the oppressed people, how they were speaking about themselves in third person.
Well, I mean, it's hard to like be like pitied. So I guess it would be easier to tell that story from like that point of view instead of have like the direct pity. Like, yeah, you have the experience, so you have the knowledge and you can say that, but that would be admitting consciously that you're actually in it, you know? So yeah, that's a really good, like, they still aren't even admitting they're oppressed while talking about being oppressed.
Yeah. Do you think like in order to get like a revolution started, like people reach the same stages at like, so like it was saying how you have to like realize who you are and like realize you've been oppressed in order, like that's the first step. Like, do you think they reach the stages all at the same time?
I always think of like I had a note actually in here about like the 30s Germany situation.
Mhm.
Like people fell for it. Like they were totally just sick of being, you know, broke and hungry and this and that. So they went along with all these ideas that weren't necessarily their own. And then all of a sudden, you know, a decade later, you're at a fever pitch.
Mhm.
So I think it's just really a, you know, almost a Russian doll situation of like problem in problem in problem that just kind of gets too full and explodes out with so much like built up force because there's so much energy behind it.
Right.
So I never think that it's just like all in one day, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely a pressure and a buildup of, well, hey, I'm oppressed. Don't you think you're oppressed? That kind of thing. And it's like, well,
Right.
what do you do about it? And
Mhm.
once you get enough people involved in that or enough, you know, situations where you get governments involved in it, you know, then you're really talking, you know, world wars and big revolutionary change like that.
Right.
Because like that's the ultimate like deal of oppression was like World War II.
Mhm.
You realize like all these people are just like losing their lives over really one person's ideas.
Mhm. Right.
he also felt oppressed.
Yeah,
So, you know, Hitler thought he was oppressed and wanted to change that.
that's
So,
crazy.
yeah, it's just like that's where it all comes from, you know? So it's like, should violence really be the answer then? Are we really getting anywhere with that?
Right,
Does it make anyone better off?
right. That's crazy. I would.
I don't know if I'm choppy.
Oh,
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is acting up. I'm like turning it off.
yeah. Okay. Um. Are you
So,
back?
yeah,
That's okay.
it's one of those.
Yeah. I was just thinking about like, sorry, every time my oven turns on, my fire alarm.
I used to have one that did it with like humidity. So anytime the humidity would be like above 80%, it would just be going off. And I was just like, yeah, super.
Yeah. Okay, we're good. I was just saying like, I think like I would love to like understand how like why did Hitler think he was like, I don't know, like serial killers and like Hitler and like all them, like I just want to know like how like why do they think they're being oppressed, and like why do they think they're so much better than anyone else? Like I guess I just don't understand, but I would like to.
Because it comes out of a place of insecurity and not having that control mechanism. So in that fight for control, you end up oppressing people because like that's how people think that they can be powerful. And
Mhm.
like for some, for a while,
Yeah.
until people get sick of their shit. So it's just one of those things. What time did we start this?
8:24.
Perfect. A few more minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything else that you found?
I think we talked about pretty much all my notes for chapter 1.
Okay. Let's see. So this little blurb here, the liberation, not a gift, not a self-achievement, but a mutual process. So
Mhm.
like that whole thing of you have to convince them to give it up and not just like be power hungry and take it.
Mhm.
So I guess that goes along with what we were saying. Like, is violence really the
Right.
action we need to go to, or is there other ways that we can like get through the process of people being less oppressed?
Mhm.
But like it's a way bigger problem. Like the United States, none of us are even a fraction as oppressed as a lot of other places.
Right.
We did you watch the like privilege walk in the video and all that with houses and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like insane to see
That
like
was so crazy.
even the poor people in the United States are still within like the top 20% like wealthy people in the world.
Yeah. That
So,
definitely was, I like that video. Like it just gave me like a better perspective on like the whole world.
well, to see things that aren't necessarily just cultural, they're what's like their what they have for resources is like the same at like a poverty level or you know an even lower poverty level. Those are comparable like worldwide. I thought that was so cool to
Mhm.
see that it wasn't just like, oh, this is culturally what we do. It's like, no, this is what we have to do.
Yeah.
So that they could put them in like a what they make based off of that.
Mhm.
just a different perspective for sure. And then the privilege walk to do that. Like I've done that before. Like I've seen it before. I didn't. Had you seen or
Yeah,
participated?
I'd seen them like on Facebook or something before. But that too, like just being like white is like such a privilege, like even in just the United States. And like people don't understand that. Like
Yeah,
white privilege, like people like even like people I know like are like, oh, there's no such thing as white privilege. I'm like, yes, there is. Like there's a ton of things that like white people can do that like it would be crazy if someone else did. Like,
I definitely don't second guess myself if I'm like going 5 over in any neighborhood, you know. Yeah, no, definitely not a worry that I have to like think about even.
right.
So yeah. And just, um yeah, there's so many different things for like entrance to jobs or college or stuff like that. Never a question of, oh, what was your name again? Or,
Right.
having your name like mispronounced or slaughtered. I've never had that happen to me. It's the little things that you don't think of. Like I remember a friend of mine, uh, her brother was mixed and she was like French Canadian, and we're in 8th grade, like that pivotal moment, like your development where everything's embarrassing. And the 8th grade teacher called her the first day of school, like for his homeroom class, and was just like, pooper, pooper. And her friend, like French name was Poopour. And it was just like, just humiliated and had to like walk up in front of her peers. And it was just like, and here we are, almost 20 years later, and I still remember it like that secondhand embarrassment. It's just like that's never something I've had to go through. Like
Yeah.
not something you have to worry about, and not something people even think about is like,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
little like that are just easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ethnic, everybody knows how to say your name.
Yeah. Like at well, my boyfriend's Mexican, and like anytime we like are like he orders on the phone or something, then they're always like, can you say that again? And he says it again, and they're like, actually we need you to spell that. And like it's just like little things like that, and I'm just like, I don't like, my last name's Adams, like nobody ever questions that. Like I just feel like everyone needs to be like more aware, I guess, of like.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband's mom was one of the kids that was actually rescued during the Cuban Castro crisis. So like the Pedro Pan kids or whatever. But like people would be like, "Oh, where's her accent from?" And I'm like, "She's lived here for she just got an invitation. It's been 60 years. Like she's 71, the majority of her life, like she's American.
Right.
Where like no, she's not going back to Cuba anytime
Right.
soon.
Right.
Over it. So yeah, it's one of those things, but he's passable. So
Mhm.
no one ever gives him a hard time. And it's just like, dude, you have to understand both sides of it. Like you have to understand what happens to your mom, and like her opinion on things is
Mhm.
different than like what you get when you go out in the world.
Right. Like people will ask me a lot of the time, like, where's your boyfriend from? Like, what part of Mexico is he from? I'm like, he was born in Kalamazoo. Like, like crazy, right? But like,
Yeah, it's funny. I'm no more than, I think like the furthest back my family goes is third generation American. So
mhm,
like I have great grandparents that came from Norway.
mhm,
Uh, my grandma was born in Germany. My dad's dad was actually a stowaway on a ship from Ireland. So it's like not, I'm like way less American than most people. And it's just, no, but you look a certain way, you sound a certain way. So like, oh, you must be whatever. And
right.
it's just okay. But you
Yeah.
hear people and their opinions on different things. And it's like, oh, okay, well, like 50 years ago, that would have been my family you're talking about. So
Right.
thanks for that. People can be really just ignorant to even their viewpoints being like intolerant.
Yeah.
So, and that breeds ground for them to oppress people because they're just like, oh, they're less than me for
Yep.
whatever cooked up idea they have in their head. So,
Or I hear a lot like in the store, like, speak English, we're in America. Like, America doesn't even have like a national language. So
yeah, no.
so they can speak whatever they want.
The point of this place was kind of the opposite of that.
Right.
So,
Right. Like people
Mel-
are so
you know,
intolerant.
yeah, it's just crazy. So, hopefully, the next 2 chapters are more insightful to how people get over that.
Right.
Because that's what that means, right? The learning
Mm-hmm.
or the teaching of the oppressed.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've hit our target.
I think so. We pretty much talked about everything.
I feel really good after the discussion. I feel a little less like, oh, I totally missed the point of this book. So
Yeah.
it was just a lot of repeating that whole concept. So,
Mm-hmm. Do
all
you
right.
know when the second discussion is due? I think I can pull it up real quick.
I thought the 12,
This-
but she moved this one, so I don't.
It looks like it's the 16th, which would be
Some journal. That was October 12th that I saw.
I guess
Yeah.
it would be next Tuesday.
Yeah.
That we just have to have it done by.
The 16th. Yep.
Do you have a preference for a time that we do it? No.
I don't think that I do.
We could do it if you want next
I
Monday.
mean, this time works for you. Yeah, that worked out fine.
Okay.
And it's definitely a time that I'm sure that I'm not doing anything. It's opening day, so I'm sure my husband will be completely gone out doing something. So
Yeah.
sounds
Okay, we can do that.
perfect. See you then.
Okay.
Have a good night. Thanks.